All right, and we're live here at StarWest 2023. And I have the pleasure of moderating this panel on AI and testing. And this is probably going to be a rowdy session. We got a room full of people. It looks like 50 or 60 people in the room here. As you all know, when I do these things, there's nothing scripted. I haven't prepared the questions that I'm going to ask. I certainly haven't seeded any questions to these folks because they wouldn't reply to my emails anyway. And we want to make sure that we are engaged both with the audience, anything online, but this is just an open discussion. We've had a lot of talks on AI at the conference so far. There's been a lot of buzz. A lot of you are using ChatGPT to do lots of things. And so anything is on the table for a question. So we're going to kick it off just with introductions. My name is Tariq King. I work for EPAM. I've worked with many of these folks before, either in a professional light or in the community. And it's a pleasure to be here. Like, it's good to see the conference is back with so many people. It feels like old times again. So with that, I'm going to pass it to Jonathan. Jonathan, introduce yourself.
Yeah, great to be here. Jonathan Wright. I actually run an R&D team based out in the Valley area. We launched our first AI augmented testing platform. Yeah. Kevin?
I am Kevin Piles. I work at a company called OC Tanner, and what's interesting about that is we actually still make stuff. For you, all of you who don't know what that means, it's a manufacturing plant where they actually touch stuff and not just keyboards.
Awkward.
Right? Very awkward.
Jewelry.
Yeah, well, jewelry too. But
All right, Chris.
Hi, I'm Chris Navarrete. I'm the founder of DevTools AI. We do AI-based automation and testing software.
Hi, I'm Diony Santiago. I am an engineering manager at Indeed, and I'm a QA geek, and I'm really happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
I guess we share. Hello. Check, check. So I'm Jason Arbin, and I'm just a test nerd, and been focusing a lot on AI and software testing a lot lately. And I think I do know all these people. There's like 0.01 diversity on this panel.
Oh boy, here we go. All right. Hey, listen, remember last time we had quite a bit of diversity. This time, this is actually a very targeted selection here that I put together for a very specific purpose. But all right, so I want to get to the audience's questions as soon as possible. But I do have one question for all of you, right? Because as we look at the current space, we looked at what's happened in the last year with ChatGPT and GPT-4 and just in general, large language models. And my question to you guys is, like, where are we going with all this? Like, what are your thoughts on the direction that we're going, especially when it comes to the quality engineering and software testing space? What do you make of all this? Very open question.
Yeah, so I'm happy to quickly start. I actually had a call this morning with a well-known bank in the UK who have started using our Gen AI solution. And what I've learned quite quickly and quite harshly is that public-facing large language models, their time is limited. You know, with the EU AI Act and some of the data privacy challenges, even private cloud, Hugging Face, I think people are going to start bringing down their own large language models and having to train them for specific industries and also for testing in general. So, you know, offline, a lot of tuning. And yeah, I think that might be the way that we're starting to see people bringing out insurance ones, specific, and also working with the rest of the community to make a testing specific GPT as well.
I guess I have a lot of thoughts on this. For the longest time, we pretended that we were trying to change stuff, but really it was just Selenium on the back end. And here we are 20 years later, and now we have to change, and it's being forced upon us. So that's a good thing. I'm really excited about the changes. And also looking forward, we're still a ways out before AI actually takes us all over. We'll let Jason say that I'm wrong. But I think instead it's, as I mentioned yesterday, it's an AI partnered future where we have to partner with the AI or either we're in trouble as individuals, meaning our jobs are in trouble, or we're just missing out on a lot of opportunities that are before us.
Yeah, I actually think it's you have to look at the time scale. So I think in the short term, it'll be more of the partnership. How can you write automation faster? How can it be more stable? How can you get a better diversity? Those aspects. I think as we go longer term, I think actually it'll swing back around where most of the code will be written by AI. And the interesting and hard part is humans will need to test and evaluate it and set those criteria, both for the code to make sure it's actually working, because it'll just generate so much code. And you might not even see the code. It'll just be the outputs that humans test and make sure this is exactly how I want it. And so I think, and then, there's the, way in the future aspects as well. But that's sort of my thought on it, is just on that time scale.
I agree with all of you. So I think if you ask ChatGPT a question today, several different times, you'll get the same question. Several different times, you'll get a different answer, slightly different, right? And so if we were to build fully autonomous testing bots today, which is possible, you actually would not really know what it's doing. And I think that in and of itself is really fascinating, but also a little bit problematic, because you don't quite know what it is going to do. And you can give it the same instructions and it will do something different every time, which is actually kind of cool, but at the same time hard to evaluate. How much coverage are we actually getting from these kinds of bots? And then I will also say that if you use a general model like ChatGPT, yes, you will be able to get general test cases. But to get app-specific test cases, I think we're a little bit a ways away from that, because it does require fine-tuning. It does require, I think it's going to take some time before the models really evolve to the point where you can just take one out of the box and use it for your application.
This is the same reason we didn't work well together, Diony, because you gave a different answer every stinking time I asked you something. I'll say there's a lot of diversity because we all used to work together for some reason, and we don't anymore. No, I think that the key thing about GPT and all this LLM stuff that's changed the world, it's the first time that software is acting like a person. That's the whole goal of this stuff, right? However, we're in the early stages right now. People that actually make these things mathematically know the progress is going to continue. It's been dramatic so far, and it's going to continue for at least a couple more years because they have it in their labs already. So it's not going to stop here. But it's the first time software's tried to work like a human and act and think like a human. But think about this. What has the role of the tester been? Right? To think like the user? To think like a human? What do people yell at me on LinkedIn all the time? Oh, the computer can't think like a person, right? Testers are safe because computers can't think like people. And it's the first time that computers are thinking like people. So I think that's the revolution there. That's what's going on in the world. There's a lot of implications. And yeah, we used to work together for a reason. I understand now why.
All right. So this is where, again, feel free. I want to make sure that we turn this into a real discussion, right? This is why there's no scripted questions. It's all about what you have on your minds. One thing I'll say is that the folks on the panel here have, in my personal experience in working with them personally, are some of the most experienced folks in this space. And that is on purpose. Because if you have hard questions, then I don't have to answer them. They can answer it, right? So let's go with the audience. What will happen here, since there's not a portable mic, ask your question. I'll try to repeat it for whoever. Feel free to target a specific person. If you want to hear Jason say something, then you ask Chris. Sorry.
That's actually deep.
Sorry, if you want to hear Jason, you can direct questions at a specific person or at the whole panel. Feel free. But any questions? One right here.
Yeah, I was wondering, how do you initially implement something like ChatGPT into testing?
Okay. So the question is, how do you initially implement something like ChatGPT into testing? Like, how do people actually get started?
Can I give a quick answer to that one, and then we can get more deep? But just go use it. I was surprised yesterday at how many people had questions And I said, well, have you tried it? Go try it first and see what you can come up with. And that may not be the depth that you were looking for, but there are many people that have not tried it. So everything that you're learning at the conference, that you go to the class and you go, oh, that's interesting. That was a pretty slide. Go back and actually try it and see what you come up with. You're all testers. You'll come up with some really cool stuff. Try it out. So that's number one.
I'll jump in quick as well. So just in case you don't have a OpenAI license or want to spend the money, if you want to go to jonathan.ai, I now have my own large language model as myself on that website for free. And you can literally just ask it to generate Selenium or do anything else. It's the full version with a bit of tuning around slightly my alter ego, and also a whole stack of ISO documentation. But anyway, if you go to that, it makes it completely free and use it as much as you want because I'm paying for it.
Sorry. Before I'm gonna let you continue in a second, but before these guys all jump on you, which is gonna happen in a second, that there's Jonathan.ai. Remember to answer this gentleman's question, please. Like before, go ahead.
So the reason why I said that was there's three use cases that we have at the moment, right? First is taking requirements. So feeding it any requirements documentation and then looking at it to create test cases. Now, I'm going to throw Checky in the mix there. So I'd recommend grabbing one of those stickers with the code on the back. And what Jason's done, which is amazing, is allows you to go to that website and it will generate all the test cases. So he's created over 600 test cases for just testing StarWest website. So if you want to add in your own website or some other tests you want to get started, that's the way to do it, which is why we got the cute robot. And then secondly, virtual test assistants are going to come in a big way. So that's a great way of kind of saying, okay, I want some test data, or I'm going to throw you a whole stack of defects, categorize them, or I've got some reports, I want to, summarize it. So try use cases that defines it for yourself within your standard testing activities. That's my big recommendation. But, some free plugs there as well for some licenses. Jonathan.ai.
Yeah.
Free.
So I went to my AI model, the amazing Chris.ai, and it says that, yeah, 404. Yeah, I think it really just depends on where you would like to use it. I think you can use general models today to help from anything learning to code, writing Selenium, fixing, fixture automation code. Kevin gave a bunch of examples of how they're using it today. Just implementing what you do today, looking at log analysis, bug triage, et cetera. There's a bunch of vendors as well, I think, here that have AI in some way, shape, or form that you could probably look at their solutions. I think, Jonathan mentioned his place has an AI solution, so you could use some of that today. Checky example. So it really just would depend. You could start to also play with some of the fine tuning in those examples, and it doesn't have to be OpenAI. There's some stuff around Llama from Meta, and you can fine tune it. And there's examples online of you and fine tuning. We talked about it in a couple of the sessions, but essentially all it is you give it, here's how it should be trained. For this question, this is the answer. And that's all you do to fine tune it. And you can do that in 10 minutes on your laptop and get something working locally. So it really just depends on where you'd want to implement it today and what your requirements are.
To add a really quick freebie, if you have a DOM output from Selenium or what have you, I know a lot of us use page objects. You can ask ChatGPT to build a page object for you. Easy.
Very useful. The way to get started, I think the most fundamental, like Kevin said, just use the UI. If you can type and you can use a text box, you can use access the world's best AI today, which is pretty cool. Just go to chat.openai.com. I think it's that, isn't it? Yeah.
How was Jonathan.ai?
Well, dude, that's the first person I've ever seen self-deprecate themselves live. I don't know why he's here. We've got an AI, right? So the simplest thing is just like Kevin said, just type it in. The other thing is there's an API for people that want to access it programmatically, and it's crazy complicated though. It's a function that takes a string as a parameter and returns a string. Like, it's really complicated. So don't be intimidated by using the API. There's even REST calls. They launched a Python SDK a couple days ago.
There's also a web interface to just try it out in a playground.
Not your turn. So the
Let me finish for Jason here.
you're right. You're right about the Chris answering for me. But the biggest tip is this: if you're going to, so that's the first thing you can access it with a text box or an API, simplest API in the world. The key thing though is to give it context. Don't just ask it a simple context-free question. Treat it like it's a person that doesn't know what you're doing. Right. So if somebody came up to you and they're asking you, you're getting a coffee at the goofy coffee shop out there. Don't just say like, give me a test case, right? Tell it what you're doing, what you're working on, what your intent is, and then ask it for a test case. And then it can be really, really smart. It's super easy. Just talk to it.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for, first of all the insightful information, Jonathan.
Wait, did we actually answer the question?
Yeah, no, we did.
Oh.
One thing I'll just add, right, which I thought was very powerful. You know, when a lot of this stuff started to kind of go boom, and I think the simplest answer here for me was the best one, which is just try it. But I'll extend it a little bit and say like, what we had done at our company was like we just opened up everyone to just doing experiments, and we actually made a nice, neat mechanism for capturing those experiments. Because again, collective knowledge, all of the humans that we have in here, if y'all are all trying it and playing around with it, and then as you use it, you give, you know, submit the prompts that you're doing and the feedback and how it worked and whether or not it helped you or didn't, then you start to figure out what use cases it's good for right now, or, you know, you start to learn from other people. So don't forget also in that, in terms of just trying it, simply just share what you've learned from trying it. And that's the easiest way to get started. There's a very low barrier to entry right now with this technology, which is amazing. Back in the day, just to do something like sentiment analysis took a lot of work. Now you can do something like that in one little question to a large language model, of course, which is pre-trained for, but there's many other things that fit into that bucket. So hopefully that'll help you get started. And Kevin's presentation, if you didn't see it, go back and look at the slides. There were a lot of useful tools like in there. It was incredible. So just want to shout out to that. And for those who didn't get to see it, check out the slides. I guess you would have shared the slides, right?
They're available in the TechWell
Okay,
app.
cool. Awesome. All right, next question. Hopefully that helped right here.
So, test case and whatever I have seen in all the sessions. So it was plain English and plain this, like log into this one and click that. So I work for insurance products, so where my test cases are more complex, I need to work with more rating logic and what. As an insurance product, so I need to work with the number of vehicles. So if I'm going with 8 drivers and 8 vehicles, so I need to set up that as data in DynamoDB in AWS. So for that, I need to go manually to DynamoDB and set up the data and come back to the test case and give the data. So how can I manage with this AI and machine?
All right, let me first repeat the question. I know you want to answer it. I'll let you jump there, right? So question in a nutshell, I'm going to summarize here. The question was around, I think my friend here is in the insurance space, and he has to deal with a lot of data in general. When he's setting up his tests, he has to go to DynamoDB and set up the test data. That gives it a particular set of preconditions that I guess your test scenarios are going to address. And you go ahead and you author your script around that data that was set up. Kevin, feel free. Go ahead. You're jumping. How do you deal with that?
All right, all of you that are working on something that you don't think ChatGPT should have access to, raise your hand. Okay, you are not unique. Do you see that? Everybody feels that way, which means all of your apps are being created somewhere else as well. Okay, and I say all of them, but most of them, like 99.9% of whatever you're working on, somebody else is probably also working on something very similar, which means ChatGPT can help you. Okay, and then my second part to that is don't give ChatGPT your data. Okay, but that's with any tool that you're using. This isn't new. I went on this rant yesterday after my presentation at lunch, so apologies to my table, but you shouldn't be giving your data to anybody. So this isn't anything new. ChatGPT can create test cases for you. You say, hey, I've got an insurance app. And on this insurance app, I've got some things, okay, which every insurance app has. And could you create some test cases for me? Boom, 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 boom. It's not going to give you 100% everything. It's going to give you something to get you started. Maybe it will get you 80% of the way there. But 80% in 30 seconds is pretty dang good. Okay? It's way better than 0% after an hour of brainstorming.
So I'll just quickly add to that, which is give it your data in an offline LLM, right? So go to GPT for all, download an offline large language model, pick something like Dolly, which is, or Llama, or whatever you want to pick. They go up to about 90 gigs, so make sure you've got hard drive space. Then ask it, feed it your data, ask it to create that SQL, whatever else you need to do, and then return it, and then ask it to format the data in the next side. But don't do it in a public facing or even I'm slightly still worried about Hugging Face, but that's just me. But even private, tenanted ones, so take it offline, control it on your laptop. You can do it this afternoon and then start using it, sending it your own data, but do not pass it to a public facing one. That's definitely very good advice. That the same as also your credit card details. But
If you've got a lot of cash to burn, you could go to Hugging Face, and you could. There's one button you can click on to deploy one of these open source LLMs. So there's a leaderboard that scores all of these different LLMs. With one button, you can click on it to deploy to SageMaker, and you can have your own SageMaker endpoint. And of course, your company may or may not be okay with that, but typically they are more data to ChatGPT.
Okay, sorry. There's also another option. First of all, I just registered jarbin.ai, literally right now up on stage. So go there and use the referral code. I actually wanted to get it before any of these guys bought it. But the key thing is, please, we don't talk when other people are talking. But the key thing is you can also download the Llama model now from HP, from Facebook, and you can run it local. You can also run it on an M2 Mac or an M1 Mac even. So if you have a Mac laptop, you can run it on that locally, and it'll work just like ChatGPT. So you can run it on your own local machine, local hard drive, all open source models and everything. So the other thing is also, last one, make sure that because Azure sponsors me next week maybe. But on Azure, you can go up there and you can use the enterprise version of GPT up there. Sorry, OpenAI has their own, but Microsoft will also host it for you. And so you get all the enterprise security and whatever that most of your IT departments are okay with today. And you can host it on there privately. Just you pay a little bit more money.
All right. So my friend,
Sorry, I'd be remiss.
Oh.
The other thing though is if you look at all the details of all these things, everything, I think Hugging Face too. The details are, I think the federal government requires to keep all of your data for 90 days. So if you do use a hosted version online, even if you think it's secure, I think the data retention policy is that they have to keep all your magic queries, credit card numbers, and secret queries. Diani, we know about them. Who loves Diani? ChatGPT does. But all those are recorded and saved for, I think, at least 90 days.
all right. So this all great, wonderful information. I'm going to hone in a little bit on the depth of what you asked, right? Because as you can see, it's easy for these folks to drift away from like the actual question, right? Which, if I remember correctly, you were talking about your test data over and away in DynamoDB and your test cases over here and how you resolve it. There's a couple practical things that I want to leave you with because I want you to remember that. In addition to all this security and privacy stuff and Jarvin.ai and all this stuff, like, it's all good. One thing I'll say, separation of data from tests has always been a thing, right? And of course, we like to make sure that everything is independent and is kind of coupled and put together at the end of the day, right? Self-contained in a way, right? But we do have like data-driven tests that go fetch this, fetch that, next thing. What I'll say is this. The first thing that is really good about large language models in terms of their applicability to testing is that one of the things it's really good at is generating test data, right? Synthetic test data. And you can just give that a general domain, it starts to spin up, and here you have a bunch of data. Now, if you can model the constraints for given tests, right? Like I want data that kind of helps me to map this scenario, right? Maybe it's, addresses that are actually valid, or maybe it's negative cases for whatever. Like, think about your chat GPT or your LLM interactions in the context of these scenarios and ask the large language model to not only generate the tests, but generate the data. and then ask it to separate the data that it is using from that test into like a JSON format, and the tests separately if you want, if you need to kind of populate them separately, or keep it together in one file format. And then you can just use that to kind of populate your database and then use that to kind of drive your test execution. So there's a couple different things that can probably help you. I would just say start playing around with it. And however you do testing, whether or not you're testing like Lambda functions or whatever, like just start to think, hey, okay, this is how I do it. Maybe this is how it can help me. Or maybe you need to rethink how you can do it to use this technology. But hopefully that helps you kind of do something practical.
I completely agree. So 80% of the test cases can be written in 30 minutes of time. So that saves more time, but still, I would say I need a manual intervention because
Yeah.
whenever I work in a coding application, so whenever you create a code, I need to go back and check another application.
Yeah.
So check whether the policy has been created and the documents has been sent to the customer. So all these, I think it will take some time to train GPT to understand all the application product requirements to write the test cases properly.
Yeah.
That's what I completely agree. So it saves some time, but still it needs manual intervention.
Yeah, and that's not necessarily going to go away anytime soon, right? Like, I mean, the human in the loop has to be a thing.
We need a moderator to focus on the answering the question. The key, I actually know what your question is now. I think there's that manual intervention to move the data around, right?
Help him
Go
decode
check
the
things
question.
rather than try to put it all into a model. I've been working on ChatGPT for at least 4 or 5 years now. That's a joke, actually. Didn't exist. But the key thing I found is rather than try to put it all into a model or fine tune it or all that stuff and kind of dream and hand wave that you're going to make this AI that can do it all, you just use crazy thing called code like Java or Python. And you rather than you go check that entry that the policy was actually created in that database, just go query for it, right? And see if it's there instead of manually do it. And then you can take the results of that policy that was created, pass it back to the LLM and say, hey, this is the policy I tried to create. This is the entry that I got back from the DB. Does this look right? Do you know what I mean? And it will actually tell you yes or no. You can give it a Boolean, but it'll also tell you like what it thinks might be wrong about it too, which is super cool. And that avoids that manual inspection of that table or that row to see if something might be wonky, a field is wonky or something. It's pretty good at just intuiting what is right or wrong in those fields. But just use Python or Java to do the plumbing behind the scenes.
Yeah.
I wouldn't put all that logic into an AI LM.
Notice you had a whole chance before this to answer the question, right? But just saying, it wasn't until I cleared up the question that you actually had a decent answer. Anyway, all right. Any other questions? Let's keep it going in the room. It would be good for someone from the back. Someone in the back. There we go.
They want to leave.
No, they get like to sneak in and sneak out. So go ahead.
I work in a bank. So what security measures should we be taking when we want to get started in engineering practices using AI?
Okay, so let me repeat the question. She said she works in a bank, wants to know what security measures or how does she actually get started in that type of environment, getting started with AI and testing.
So with banking, there's a lot of those regulations. I think we've talked a bit about you can take offline models so that they are air gapped. No data would leave your system and it's all controlled. That's probably going to be the best. The second best is a lot of these enterprise solution and SaaS companies. So AWS, Microsoft, Salesforce have these large language models that are every compliance imaginable, SOC 2, HIPAA, et cetera, that you can call. And so those are probably your two best options on that, just depending on what your corporate security would allow.
And then actually back to repeat again what Trick was saying earlier, you can also just use GPT or whatever the LM is to generate test data. Like we do this a lot of times too in testing these systems. If there's PII or HIPAA or something, you test the system with just fake patients, right? Fake information, fake accounts. So, but GPT is really good at generating fake accounts that are consistent too. You can even like, give me an address, right? And then you can say, give me an address in New York City that's valid. Give me one that's invalid or whatever. So you can use that. Also, there's a company, I don't know them, but called Tonic.ai that uses AI to focus on data generation. It's another way, but you can test your logic. Don't use PII or dangerous information in the testing flows.
All right. Any other questions? All right. Someone in the back. Thank you. You got to project for me.
I'm going to stand so super short. Hi, good. So I work on a legacy system
Okay, cool. So to repeat the question, she's working on a legacy system. There seems to be a lot of black boxes and different components that are, and to my understanding, having some sort of level of degradation over time. How do we use AI to help with, number one, in general, I think, testing legacy systems, and then in specifics of this context, like, hey, is there anything that AI can do to help maybe improve the testability of legacy, or bring it forward so that like we can help identify risks?
I can take a stab. I think there's a couple of different approaches that you could do depending on what level of documentation and how well things are documented. If it's truly a black box, it's, a bunch of optimized C code that has no comments. What you can do to start is have ChatGPT or one of these LLMs go in and just write code documentation for you. It can then write documentation about APIs, assuming it's an API service. And then you can leverage that and say, given this API, what are the tests that you would run against this, and have it actually just run it. I think you could also leverage, if you have any logging or log systems, you could use that to look at what is the user doing on the system and then generate tests for that. Those would be kind of the two ways, but I think, just building it up from the best engineering practices, it can just take that raw input of the code and start to build it as a small building block and just chunk after chunk. So feed it one method, one code file at a time. Then you can feed it the whole file and say, summarize what this file does and put a comment at the top, and then build documentation for the API, write the test for the API, write this, that, write unit tests, write integration tests, etc.
Just a kind of a really quick added on there. That was my 4:30 a.m. call, was a COBOL to Java transformation, which they asked the exact same question, and I answered with I don't think I can do it. However, they told me a company that does do it. It does start with Blue. It isn't made by IBM, but I can pass you the name of the company, which actually looks at legacy code like COBOL and tries to understand it. If you've got things like Diff Blue, which I know, Tarek, you've had a lot of success with those guys, and you're looking at code coverage and trying to understand the state of things, again, it's language dependent, but there's plenty of good solutions out there. So yeah, I'll give you the name of the company that can do it. I have no idea. I said no.
Jason, you have something?
Yeah, I was just telling Diani, if I'm annoying, don't give me the microphone. So that's very like, I won't criticize Chris's answer. It's about code. If you're testing these black box systems from a black box, I'm like, who are these people? Who would hire these people? So one thing that's funniest is just ask ChatGPT the same question you asked us. Like literally, if you want to replicate this session for the next year, just ask ChatGPT. I have a black box system. It's going wonky. Like, what can I do? The crazy thing is, it's indexed all those painful stories on the internet, and it can probably have a conversation with you definitely better than Chris or Jonathan.ai. Who said
How would you start that conversation off though, Jason? Would you say, imagine you're a testing nerd who's had 5 coffees and been up for 28 hours?
Hasn't left the house in a month. Thanks. You know me too well. So, but the one is just to have a conversation with ChatGPT and just be very precise, give as much context as you can, and ask follow-up questions like you would anyone except for Chris. So the other thing too is you can also it's crazy. These things do produce logs. They do produce output. So the goofiest thing, it sounds like no one thinks, I think I have to do all this thinking and stuff. Just raw copy and paste some subset of the logs into ChatGPT and say, what do you think? like I don't understand it, just say no worky, right? Like, I don't know what's going on here. There might be a problem. Can you suss anything out? Sometimes it can. And often I've seen in people trying to apply this to, it's not a lot of samples, but some people have tried to apply to legacy systems, is that they often those legacy systems use common components, common logging, common old school infrastructure, and so it recognizes those log formats, right, where you may not have even seen it before, and may see issues that it's seen before too. So just have a conversation with it and share it as much data as you can.
Yeah.
The system.
One thing I would tack on there to the log comment, because in general, especially when you're using prompt engineering, it's kind of hard to feed a very large context. But Diani mentioned it yesterday, and it's something that we do quite frequently. You can start to encode those logs or vectorize them into embeddings and feed a larger context with your log, and do quite a bit of powerful things. So if the logs will help you, definitely know that that's a good source. And then with a little bit of extra effort or expertise, like you can actually feed the entire log or even entire documents to these large language models.
Yeah, and one to add to that, the context window is definitely a problem, right? So you'll have a limited amount of information that you can feed it. So you might think when you open up a ChatGPT chat on the web browser, you might think like, hey, this thing can go on forever, but it actually doesn't. It actually has a limited window of information. So with a vector database, you can actually take a whole bunch of information. If you have a huge corpus of requirements, documentation, logs, whatever, you can convert all of that into and push it into a vector database, and then at prompt time, you can actually query that vector database for, hey, give me the most relevant information out of my huge knowledge base of data for this particular prompt, and you can kind of choose and and append that to your context because you have a limited context window.
One more thing. Sorry, I think it's a big important deal. There's a lot of people talking about these vector databases and stuff, which are legit. It's legit. I'm not picking on you guys for once. But the other thing you do, it's crazy complicated. If you have like a 100 megabyte log file, cut it into smaller pieces. And put those pieces into it and ask about those log files independently. It's very rare that something that happened, way up here in the log file is relevant. Something happens and it happens, but most of the issues are pretty localized in the log files. So just chunk it, cut it in little pieces, and pass those in a little loop if you want to use the API or with your mouse, copy paste it in ChatGPT and just ask it. You don't have to create all these vector databases and stuff necessarily either.
All right, cool. Next question. Right here.
So are there any branches outside of large language models making a big impact on software testing at this point?
Okay, cool. So the question is, are there any branches of AI or ML outside of large language models making an impact on software testing?
I completely realized that I didn't get the full question before answering it. I was just going to say about visual GPT and auto GPT capabilities are quite impressive. If you've seen auto GPT, that can bring multiple threads together to solve things like continuous deployment problems. So, deploying dependencies on code bases on GitHub, GitLab, that's quite impressive. Visual GPT's recently been introduced, so passing it screens. You mentioned about passing it DOM elements or HTML. Actually, visual screen recognition, I think, is going to be really big for testing down the line. So.
So like at my company, we have a model that's specifically trained for visual object detection on web pages and mobile apps. We've tried it with other models that are large language, and those don't work out as well from what we've seen. So this one is a special use case. I've also seen work with specific models that are not large language models trained for log analysis. So being able to look at logs, and they're trained specifically for one task. I think those are kind of the main two, but a lot of the new stuff that you're seeing, like Jason was saying earlier, is the large language models open up so much more because they're human-like and are very flexible and malleable. And so it just lends itself to a lot of places within testing and the development software life cycle.
You can also use LLMs to use the other branches of AI and ML. As I was thinking, you can use sentiment analysis. You should probably use ChatGPT to run the sentiment analysis on stuff. You could do linear regression. You should probably use ChatGPT to do linear regression. So yes, there's a lot of other aspects of AI ML that can be used, but ChatGPT and LLMs just really help you do all those other things really fast.
One thing I mentioned in my workshop earlier this week, you might find it a little difficult to kind of figure out where to get started. So if you want to build something similar to what Chris mentioned, and you want to use computer vision for object detection, or even use computer vision to help you have more confidence in your assertions, like you actually want your automation to see, right? And not just check the DOM, essentially. You can go to an application called RoboFlow. It's actually free to use as long as you're willing to share your data. So obviously you have to take that into account, but it's free to get started and to learn how to build your own computer vision models. And guess what? All you have to do is upload your images, super easy. You can do your labeling, and you can tell it, I want to build a model using whatever state-of-the-art model off the shelf, and it'll generate the Python code for you. So it'll literally give you the Python code that you have to just run to train your model. So very low barrier of entry.
So one thing I'll say as well that I think is a branch, and I'm a big fan of, and I mentioned it yesterday, was generative adversarial networks, right? So the idea of leveraging these machines to compete against each other to help improve a given problem space, right? I think at the end of the day, and I haven't talked about this subject in a while, but I used to really kind of emphasize that I think that machines should be able to test themselves. And to be able to get there, I think part of the equation has to be defining a way that the machines can actually test out different permutations, learn from that as feedback in a fully automated way, and continue to do that and improve and improve and improve. So in addition to like combining different techniques, because it's great that we have large language models, right? And now we can deal with natural language in a great way. It's great that we have computer vision and we can give the machines eyes to see and act like humans, right? I think combining those things is the first step. And then also looking at then with a combined effort, just like how we might compete against each other and it might make each of us better as we compete, can we build the machines in a way that they're great? Maybe I build a great testing bot A and a great testing bot B, and I put them in a competition. And we humans judge the competition, but the bots are learning from that feedback to become better and better testers. So I'll also think that GANs are still a big leap forward in this space. All right, another question here.
What is your favorite or most used AI tool? I know ChatGPT a lot, but I realize there are other ones. What's your favorite?
All right, cool. So question is, what is your favorite or most used AI tool for the panel?
Checky.ai, I think, is my favorite by far.
I second that.
Just dropped it in. I'm going to kind of push slightly to the last question as well around, I love DALL-E and Easy Diffusion, and then we do play them off against each other quite a lot. So the GAN stuff is really important, but also most of the custom vision stuff that you can use is really powerful. The Google stuff's really powerful. Checky.ai, of course, I'm going to throw in there, is a great solution. But yeah, part of it is find what works for you in your particular field of area. You know, ChatGPT isn't the solution to all problems. Like I mentioned AutoGPT before, that's a great tool if you're in pipeline. Think of the persona that you're wanting to do. If you want to be we talked about the fourth amigo being the AI in the loop or the human in the loop. Part of it is start adding it to the activities. You know, Tarek did a great example a couple of weeks back when we were in Vienna, which was giving the transcript of a Teams call, defining requirements with a business analyst, passing it in, and then getting it to write a whole stack of requirements. You know, depending on what flavor of tool you want, there's the devtools.ai as well. You know, you can use these different tools depending on the type of problem you've got to solve. But yeah, check out Checky and check out kind of the ones that we talked about today.
Yeah, I want to say that this is happening so fast. Like last year, there were a couple, maybe 2, 3 AI talks at this conference. Now it's everything, I think, like 60% of the sessions. So this revolution is happening fast because the key thing to take away is that it's happening exponentially. People don't realize that. People never understand exponentials. If you think you do, you're wrong. It's still going to happen faster than you think. So we're on an exponential curve in terms of this kind of intelligence explosion, right? And so what's happened, like in the last year, just the last year, not only has GPT launched, let's go back to the question, the basic question, don't worry. Everyone's like, which tool do I use? Which LLM do I use? I actually think it's maybe the wrong question. The right question is Checky.ai. Okay, sorry. No, but that's an example of a vertical for testing, right? But what you're seeing is Microsoft, like not the world's fastest moving company on the planet, has already integrated it into the shell of their operating system, right? Google's deploying on Bard, right? They're integrating it with Google Search. So you will be using the best LLMs on the planet, like by default, if you just keep doing what you're doing today. You say just ask the question of Google, or you ask the question of whatever it is, Clippy in Windows, you'll get the best LLM. So it'll happen whether you like it or not, or realize it or not. I think we were already moving past that section, that time, and where we have to pick the right tool, because it's already been integrated in the tools we want. And then if you look at the sponsor booths, right? Find me one that doesn't claim they're integrating AI, right? So if you keep using the tools that you're using today, I wouldn't, as a one person or a small team at a company, unless you're really ambitious or have a lot of cash and time, don't go try to rebuild your own. Like all the sponsors in the building, in the room over there, are spending tons of your money to add AI to those tools. So it's probably the easiest way to leverage these things is not go from scratch again. I could have just said this in 1 second. Use the tools you're using already today, and AI will just appear very quickly anyway. You don't have to worry about going to scratch and using the API to GPT or do some reinforcement learning yourself. It'll just appear in your tools and software you use every day very quickly.
Yeah, I would probably say I second that. Like, you don't see too many new AI first companies in the same way you saw like mobile first companies, right? There's, when mobile was big, that you saw, a mobile version of banking that's mobile first, or a mobile version of whatever. And the larger, more established companies ended up building mobile apps to catch up. I think we've already surpassed that or gone through that whole transition. And so you don't see mobile or, AI first versions of Notion's adding AI. Like, so for answering just the question, Grammarly AI, I really like, and a company called Mendable. They do documentation. They put ChatGPT into documentation sites. So then you can ask it a question like ChatGPT, how do I do this? And it will just write you sample code, for instance.
Just one other really nerd note is that, if you also read some of the sponsors, I'll behave, but some of the sponsors marketing, they use 18 different types of AI and machine learning and stuff. We know it's marketing, but they are using AI and stuff in their stuff. But the interesting thing is, the reason, what other AIs other than, I think was the original question, what AI other than ChatGPT or LLMs, right? Like, what else is there that's cool or coming in emerging? The reality is weird. What's going on right now is that the initial LLM model is being modified, right? With reinforcement learning, with human feedback. So now you've got reinforcement learning combined with, that's what GPT-4 really is, the magic of it, is reinforcement learning combined with these attention heads in the transformers, and you're seeing more and more of that. So more and more, these models aren't just one flavor; they're combinations. They're compositions of other models. So they're basically all merging right now, right? The magic of the ChatGPT and why you hear that all the time is that's the interface, because it's a chat. It makes it super accessible. You don't have to code, all this stuff. You don't have to learn anything magic, no magic syntax. So it's very accessible. But behind the scenes, what DeepMind's doing at Google and even at OpenAI and at Microsoft, they're merging behind the scenes and combining all the intelligence of all the other types of models, and they're integrating it for you. So really, it looks like in the near future, your ChatGPT, the LLM chat interface and that API of just strings is going to be the primary interface, but you'll be using all the other types of AI ML models behind the scenes. You just won't know it. You just get the right answer.
All right. Question here. Yeah.
We've been talking, as we should, about using AI for testing. But unless I missed it, I haven't heard anything in the other direction. What about using traditional or non-traditional testing techniques to test AI software? So, for example, in the world of autonomous vehicle control software, people are doing things like embedding neural nets within higher level language programs. Do we know how to test that?
So let me repeat the question really quickly. The question was really, we've been talking a lot about using AI in testing, but what about testing AI and machine learning systems? And, I guess even in the last few days in talking at this conference and seeing a lot of the things going on, there's a big question mark around the reliability and trustworthiness of these systems. Sounds like the gentleman has some experience in this field. I think we had a conversation as well earlier this week on this. What are your thoughts?
So I will start and say that I think one of the things about GPT and all these different LLMs is they're exciting, but they're also very frightening. And the reason is that we really don't
Let's go right.
Sorry, it keeps me up at night sometimes.
Yeah.
So I think we have to get ahead of it. And I think it's a really, really great question because everybody at the conference is talking about how do we use it, but not enough people are talking about how do we test it. And I think I gave a lightning talk yesterday exactly on this topic. And there's a lot of really smart folks that are building evaluation harnesses. So if you go to Hugging Face, how do you think they actually score and benchmark these LLMs? Behind the scenes, there's a whole bunch of people that are thinking about this question and thinking about how do we actually know whether an LLM is performing adequately or not. And a lot of the tools that they use for that are actually open source. And you can go and pull them down yourself locally. You can examine the tasks that already exist that other people have built, and even add your own tasks to start testing these things. Because I think we do really need to shift more attention to testing these things.
So just a quick one. I've not promoted the company that I work for, but the booth, I've just published a book called Artificial Intelligence for Software Testing. If you go to the booth, you can download the full ebook. And that was done with about 5 of us, including some well-known people in the space around how to test AI-based systems. So it's based on the ISO 29119 Part 11 ISO working group, which is around how to test AI-based systems, which I can share you the documentation around. My friend Davey from the Pentagon created a company called Calypso, which also does and open sources their way of indexing the risk and ethics frameworks as well. There's lots more that you can find there, but I'd recommend downloading that book. It's completely free, and it's got a whole stack of professors who specialize in this area. But yeah, I completely agree. It's an area that we should spend more focus on.
This must just be how my mind works, but there's a lot of, I don't know, a lot of content, data, all this stuff that we talk about, tons of buzzwords. But I'm reminded of a slide many years ago that Jason shared, which is actually the most frustrating slide I've ever seen because it simplified my job. There's an arrow that is the input, there's a black box, and then there's an arrow that's the output. And that is what our jobs entail. We determine what the inputs are, stuff happens, and then we check the output. And I think we get way too wrapped up on what happens in that black box because we're testers and we want to know everything that's happening inside there. And I understand observability, and I know we're going to come up with a whole bunch of AI terms. But in the end, our jobs are to make sure that when we give the models and everything else input, do we get out what we're expecting to get out? And if I do that on a daily basis, and when I see the output and it's not correct on all of these tools that we're using, give the feedback, fix whatever it is that happens in that black box, and then rerun the input through that black box and check that the output is now working. And so that's how I look at a lot of this stuff is we really complicate a lot of this. And in the end, unfortunately, sorry, I'm a tester too, but like that's our job. It's that simple.
So I'm gonna kind of disagree a little bit on that black box and not caring about what's inside.
Cut his mic.
Partially because you mentioned something. You said, you have this arrow coming in and you have this black box and we check the out, but then, fix whatever's in that black box. Well, that sounds real easy to say, fix whatever's in that black box.
Not my job.
But what? There lies the problem, right? Fixing whatever's in that black box becomes very challenging if you haven't looked inside that black box and made sure what is in there is actually testable and that you can control. It's like me saying, my Maserati engine is broken, fix it. Well, you can only fix it because it has been instrumented and there's diagnostics on every individual little part. Now, the thing with AI is that we really don't know a lot about what these neural networks are doing, which makes it very hard. And I know Jason is dying and burning. I'm saving you, Kevin, from Jason speaking
oh, no.
directly after this question.
I said they're gonna attack this, and I recognize that.
I'm
because
saving you. I'm not attacking you. Jason will attack you now.
There's a lot that goes into that black box, but I think too often we get so wrapped up in his Maserati, which he doesn't own.
Because I own a Tesla, but apparently you're supposed to tell everyone that you own a Tesla at the end of your presentation. But that's just what I heard during.
I think really too often we complicate it instead of just getting the testing done. And yes, there are a lot of Tariqs in the world and Jasons in the world that will figure out the black box and fix it. But as testers, we also have to get the testing done and not get so wrapped up in the black box that we forget to do the testing.
I tried to save you.
Okay, as you know, a famous artist once said, why does my name keep coming out your mouth? Swish, swish, bish. Sorry. Yeah.
Gotta be finished.
No, the funny thing is, Tariq is 100% wrong. Kevin's kind of right. So the funny thing is, I thought like, it's, oh, there's all this fancy. First of all, no one knows how the LLMs work. They just don't. Okay, even people making them don't know what's going on inside. We're still figuring that out. That's number one. So even if you could understand the inside and figure out what's going on and fix it, you can't understand that you're blocked already. We don't know how they work, which is crazy. We know it's a neural network, but that's it. Wow, Tariq actually looks like I'm.
Oh, you're
triggering
still
something. All right.
wrong. I'm just
It was
gonna
nice,
let you.
This is the
speak.
last time you may ever see me, but there's two crazy things about that. One is that if you dig into how GPT-4 is tested, like I went through, I'm a lonely person, got lots of time between 90 Day Fiance and AI, and I looked through all the documents. Guess what they do? It's all these eval things on the Hugging Face and stuff. If you look at them, they're just questions and answers. It's crazy, simple, stupid. It's the black box that Kevin's talking about. And so they're just question and answers. That's how they evaluate it. Like, and guess how they test it for math scores or English or English, like, what was it, recognition or whatever. Anyway, but just they give it tests from school kids. They give school kids the same input and output. That's how they measure these things, right? And they give it the bar exam, right? And so that's funny, is that really they're testing, even OpenAI and these people are testing it with black boxes. So they're actually going back to that input and output thing, and it's approachable. You guys can come up with prompts and test the output and say whether it's good or bad. The craziest part is, if you really double click into that, is these tests are horribly written. They're the worst test cases on the planet. A quick example, one that came out, drives me nuts. Everybody's like, can GPT think and whatever. And so these Stanford, I said this yesterday, sorry, quick, this is the best example ever of how these LLMs, they're scarily how horribly they're tested. You guys should help test. You're testers. Guess who's testing it? PhDs that don't know how to test. So the Stanford paper came out a few weeks ago, right? Guess how they tested it on prime numbers? They tested the first 300 prime numbers and said, hey, is this a prime number? And they go, and GPT got this one right, and this one right, and this one wrong, and this one right. Guess what they didn't test? Quick, this is awesome. 0, exactly. Minus, wow, that's a complex question. No, like, what else did they not test? Every freaking other number, okay? They didn't test, they didn't ask it, what is Tariq a prime number, right? They didn't ask any of these things. That's the type of testing that we have on LLMs today from Stanford, right? Like they try to pretend that there's some interesting school or something, apparently not. But this is where I get worked up. The world needs testers, and this is the perfect question, is how do we test these things? If you look into it, no one's testing that crap. And then we're all using it to do our testing. It's concerning. Like, really, I'm concerned, not just that it will destroy the planet, but like no one's testing the tests, which is the ultimate question, right?
All right. So now that Jason has gone on a rant, which we knew was going to happen before the end of this whole thing, let me just say, the fact that they're saying don't open up the black box, these are being tested with inputs and outputs, and these models perform so horribly, means that we need to do a little bit more. So I agree with one thing Jason said. We need everyone in this room to contribute to the testing of these models. I don't think they remain black boxes. I think that they need to be able to at least explain how they came to a result. Otherwise, we won't really know what that behavior is looking like. Testing demands controllability and a level of observability. And Jason's going to complain now. Don't give him the mic. Take it back. Take it back.
Okay,
Gianni,
here's the other
Gianni.
thing though. I want to say, what is the oracle we use for LLMs? People write the oracles, right? Do we trust them? Do they have different opinions, right? Even humans have different opinions. So the funniest thing is, it's the hardest testing problem on the planet because there is no oracle and everyone has their own oracle. So even understanding how it's thinking, if you understood how Tariq's mind was working right now, you knew every neuron, all three of them. If you mapped all three of these things, right? And I believe they're fighting each other right now. They're in a wrestling firing match. But it doesn't matter even how it's working. That's part of it. That's interesting. But the thing is they're all different and everyone have a different oracle on how it's supposed to behave. Different opinions, different understandings. And so really the problem is that we don't know how to test these things. We're entering a realm but we're testing, and the hardest problem in humanity right now, literally, is how do we test these things? And how do you test them? I was geeking out yesterday with somebody. How does a monkey test a human? Right? That's where we're starting based on it's gonna be higher IQ than you next year, right?
Oh, higher IQ than me already.
No,
It's nearly Einstein.
I think you're 156.
No.
So, oh really? I'm
Yeah,
so shocked.
No.
So, but
I've declined over
question
the
is,
years.
how do you test something that's smarter than the tester? That's what's so beautifully crazy abstract about that. And that's the real problem we're trying to address here. And we just do not know. And the people that are supposed to be testing these things are still just giving it grade school exams and asking it random questions.
All right.
And for whether the square root is
as well, I want to make sure I don't forget one piece of housekeeping. First of all, thank you to the Senior Performer for streaming this all. That's great. Thank you very much. Also, again, very unscripted, just real conversation. As you can see, it's a hard panel to control. But also, Techwell really loves, and Jason really loves feedback. He goes home and he reads everything to himself to sleep at night. So please scan the QR code. Make sure that you give feedback on the session. If you enjoyed it, hopefully you got to engage, ask questions. These folks are around. Trust me, I've worked with these folks probably too much. And they know their stuff. They're all opinionated. A lot of the opinions may not align with yours, but it's good to get all the different viewpoints. And I hope that we brought that today. And thank you so much, each and every one of you, really. This is quite a